Okay, the bell outside has been called, so I think we should just start. So welcome to Hybrid UI. We'll go through what Hybrid UI is, why, and we'll do some exercises. But before we do the code exercises, I'll go through the why and what. Why version 2 or why Hybrid UI? We got a lot of feedback over the last year after we released version 1 that the UI was slow, or as we in engineering call it, unoptimized. Same thing actually. There was of course completely different concepts between the backend and the frontend, so forcing both us and you to learn two completely different concepts. Basically having a front-end team and a back-end team, which wasn't necessarily always efficient. And then the fact that the UI, which we based on and thought would be a stable choice back in 2014, died in 2015, or was deprecated. So it was definitely something we needed to move away from, but we were in a situation where we were in the time pressure and needed to deliver version 1, so we couldn't really deal with it back then. But now it's over time to deal with it. So then a little bit on what it is. As maybe understood from the title of this talk, it's first and foremost about the UI. So it's the hybrid UI. And that is an effort to greatly simplify the effort for our partners and community to work with the UI, to extend it, and it's basically rewriting it from pure JavaScript applications into a hybrid application, which specifically is Easy Platform plus Symfony, or Easy Platform being on top of Symfony, it's kind of implied, but Easy Platform application with JavaScript enhancing it where needed. We also, as part of it, it's a major version, so we also do some improvements on the kernel. We try to improve both speed and the developer experience, where we can see possibilities of doing that in the way. We also bump to Symfony 3.3 and higher, which comes with a lot of improvements for everyone, including us. And we also, as part of this, not necessarily code change, but from the product team, there's also a new UI guideline, which is very comprehensive, not just for us, but also for you if you want to extend the UI and provide to the community in something that looks consistent with the whole UI. There's a ton of guidelines for how to add different components to the UI. A little bit of warning before we regarding this. Unfortunately, Batra could not join this time, so I'm holding this in his place. That has some side effects that I won't go so much deep like he probably would. He's more dealing with this on a daily basis. Also, hybrid UI is in heavy development, so it won't look super great on the styling yet or anything like that. But if you want to have a guess at where the UI goes visually, have a look at the UI guidelines and you'll see it quite clear. But thanks to the team that's done a great effort trying to document things on the way, much better than maybe we've been able to do before. I managed to jump into this on short notice on Saturday actually, and you'll see also that there's not that much magic going on. It's quite straightforward to extend the UI. And also, as it's in heavy development, some of the internals is maybe not so interesting to talk about anyway, as it might change. Just briefly, given we're going to work with the Symfony 3 application, show you what that means. I think most of you have, but if you don't, be aware that the following changes have occurred. There is now bin for console, for instance. You'll see that. There's also things to take care of when if you have a parameter, you need to quote it, because otherwise it will be, you'll get a parser error from the YAML. And maybe most importantly on the future side, there's a lot of new components. There's cache, there is .env, which is kind of like what Docker uses for .env files. There's guard, which simplifies the whole security system. It was already available in 2.8 and 3.0, but yeah. There's LDAP, and there was supposed to be log, but it's a bit uncertain if it actually comes. There's the web link, which allows you to deal with links in terms of HTTP too. So for push and stuff like that. And there's workflow that we'll come back to probably later, not today. That we'll hopefully take advantage of. I'm just going to go a little bit into cache, because that's one of the things we refactored the kernel for. So that's one of the things you should be aware of. On the cache itself, if you're aware of cache system, this is PSR6 compliant. It's also supports something called multi-get, which is beyond what's in the PSR6. Allows you to get several items at the same time. Well, it allows you to do one call to Redis and Memcache at the same time for several keys. That's the key. Too much keys in that sentence. Oh yeah, you didn't see that, sorry. Thirdly, provides several built-in cache adapters. Just some here, Redis, Memcache, file system. There's also APC and all the regular suspects. And importantly for us, there's the tag-based invalidation, which I'll get back to. So let's look at what that means for AC platform. So one of the things that we've seen on the speed side of AC platform, especially if you're on a cluster, is that the cache system, you end up with thousands of calls to Memcache basically. And this is where it comes from. So what you're seeing here is how many lookups Stash versus Symfony will do to Memcache, depending on what you're doing. So if you do a load content info, Stash would do 5 in the background, and Symfony would do 1 in the background with the new kernel. That's already the case on what we're going to work with here today. And on file locations, even more so, there's 10 items maybe being returned in the search query. It will do, this is not a joke, I used the number 42 here, but it's right. It will look up Memcache 42 times, while with Symfony Cache it will do it once. And why is this important? Because in cluster, where Memcache is not on the same server, you have latency and so on. This starts to be a lot of back and forward talking between AC Platform and Memcache. So that is clear, but maybe what's not clear for you is why is Stash doing so many lookups? And it's because of its hierarchical cache. So you have in a key here for instance, content info, you would have 5 items in the path. It would be ECP / content / info / integer. I lost one now, but there's supposed to be 5. So that explains, no, actually, that's right, because it will look up the 4 items in the path and then get the item. So it does a lot of magic things to do this, and the reason is hierarchical cache means you can say, please clear content / please clear all content. And this is where the magic comes in. So that's what it benefited us from moving to Stash back in version 5, because it made it very easy to clear cache on the way. But with Symfony Cache, that's done with tagging, and instead of talking about it, I'll just show it. Yeah, so with Stash, when you clear something, you would need to clear everything, and in some cases also subtrees of the cache. So you would clear content. This is on a content change. You would need to, we internally in AC would need to clear content info remote ID, but because we don't have that, we will need to clear all, and so on and so forth. With Symfony Cache, what we benefit, and also you, can take advantage of is the tagging. So if all cache items have a relevant tag, we just clear content ID, and that takes care of all of them. So it's a second key lookup that the tags take care of, and code-wise it's a benefit, and also as you saw on the previous slide on the lookups, it has a clear speed or performance benefit. Not so maybe so relevant, but also on the storing side, if you ever need to use this yourself, there is a bit of a difference. You typically do a bit more work up front. So when you need to store something in cache, you need to calculate the tags involved. So that's the difference on that side. So more work up front, but less work afterwards on invalidation. And also much less work during lookups, which I showed on the 42 version 1 versus 1. Nothing about cache here. Any questions about cache? It's not really the main topic here, but no. PHP API, this is maybe more relevant for you because we are talking about hybrid UI where you actually use the same API as you would do on the front end. And we have some improvements for you and probably more eventually. Basically, one of the changes now that came in 1.10 is that you don't need to specify languages anymore when you deal with the value objects. So you have done your lookup to the repository API, you've gotten your content object, and what's new now is that if you specified languages when you did the fetch on repository, it already knows. So it doesn't need to know it once more. So you don't need to all the time specify languages everywhere for using the object. It knows because you already provided it to the repository API. Maybe more clearly where this, well, one more example before I show the benefit in Twig. This also affects fields basically. So you can easily get a field like this. And talking about Twig, and this is maybe where it's more clear, you don't necessarily need to use these kind of helpers anymore because you can do content dot fields and get the right translation directly on the object. So yeah, it's a small step, but hopefully we'll have more of those. Another nice big, quite big change, and we can thank Jerome here for that. It's a design engine. So, did you cover it in your talk? Yeah. So I won't really cover it much. It allows you to have themes and allows you to have designs. So you can have different layers of designs and apply them depending on what you need. What that means is we can have a standard design from EC, and you can extend it with your custom design. But reusing whenever you need from us, like in Legacy, basically. And this is extracted from EC Core Extra Bundle, and it's in its own package and bundle with the product as of 1.10. And we intend to use this in admin as well. Now, a lot of different topics there, but now coming back to hybrid UI. What is it? Well, we talked about Symfony. It's a pure Symfony 3 application, almost, written in PHP 7. We try to use auto-wiring for certain things. We'll see what makes sense there. But Symfony 3 allows you to do auto-wiring, meaning you don't necessarily need to configure all services. I won't be able to show that today, but if you want to learn about that, maybe check out Ryan's Flex, Symfony Flex talk, maybe, or check online on Symfony. However, beyond using just the PHP API, there's other things involved here as well, just like on the front end. You have site access. So Eddie hinted it earlier in the previous talk. You have a site access which is automatically created for you. So you can configure it if you want, but you don't have to. It will automatically take the site group you're on and create an admin for it, /admin. This allows you to, again, like in legacy, be able to customize who has access to this, who has access to the admin. Also allows you to set up template and controller customization, overrides, and so on, just like you're used to on the front end, so that you can really use everything from Easy Platform also in the admin. And the Easy Design Engine is fully available. Hybrid UI also have a new content engine, editing engine. It's very work in progress right now, but what I can share on that is it's building up upon the previous work we've done on something called repository forms. It was also called sometimes UGC externally, so user-generated content. So it was very limited before, but now it gets the full editing capabilities. And what it builds upon is Symfony Forms. So if you know Symfony Forms, it's quite easy to get used to repository forms, which basically ties Symfony Forms together with the repository. You can overwrite back office templates, and you can also enrich these form elements with JavaScript if you want. So maybe in terms of content editing, what's more interesting for everyone is how you deal with field type migration. And actually, it's not that difficult, as we will show in very soon. When you're coming from version 1, you actually only have to add something called field value mapper, because everything you need is mostly there already. You might also need to add a template for this field for the editing part, but out of the box, if you have the mapper, it generates the form for it, so it can work like that. The template is more if you want something to style it better or use different HTML generated and know what Symfony does, or you need to have some JavaScript. If you're coming from version 5, then some of the things that you're used to for moving to version 1 then applies. Then also we need to have a field definition mapper. This is what you encounter when you go to admin and content type editing. So it maps the field definition. So if you're already on version 1 and you already covered that, you don't need it. But if you're coming from version 5 and you have the Symfony field, Symfony stack or platform stack field type already from version 5, then you need to add this. If you're coming from version 4, or what we call as pure legacy in version 5, you need the field type, you need the field definition plus value mapper, and that's the minimum. In all of the cases there, you can optionally also add, as I mentioned, templates. You can also add indexable search field. You can have external storage if there's an external table involved. And you can have a nameable field if there's a very complex logic involved in generating the name of the field. Examples of that is selection and relation. So that's more or less it around field types. Anything missing, Jerome?
I don't think so.
Basically, you don't need to think about platform UI here. It's not there anymore. So you don't need to think about, in this migration to hybrid UI, you don't need to think about the handlebar templates and the services for platform UI and so on. So, with that said, we can see if we can get started with some coding. I have some problems with my VM, but we'll see if I can show you on screen. Otherwise, we will anyway go around, help you as much as we can. So, before we start, my wingmans here, Yanni and Andrew and Adam, can you rise up? So, Yanni from Professional Services in EC, from Finland. And then Andrew here first, and Adam secondly from our Polish office in respectively Katowice and Krakow, working in engineering. So we are here to help you through this. As shown here on the screen, you should now go to the hybrid UI folder, and you'll need to do a git pull. And if you get conflicts, please tell us, and we'll resolve it. But if you haven't already pulled it, you shouldn't have this. And then open app config services YAML. There, all the steps we will try to go through here today are defined, also with links to documentation on where you find information about how to solve them. And also the link to how to open this and check it out in the browser is, as in any other of the workshops, the web SE alias, and in this case, Easy Hybrid UI. And for the backend, /admin. If you want to see the front end, skip to admin, as usual. Yeah. So I think I'll switch to PHP Storm now, so we follow the same thing. It should be admin publish. And you might need to refresh after hitting login. There's a bug there. Also, some of the steps here might be quite easy for some of you. So if you want to be extra creative, go ahead. At the end of the workshop, we'll announce the winner that gets the Symfony Pelephant. So knock yourself out. But of course, if you're new to this, probably stay within the documentation. Is this readable or besides? Okay. So the first step is quite simple. It's just about adding a zone in the hybrid UI. The link, if you haven't seen it yet, is here. You can also look up in the local installation, but there are some fixes in the online doc, so preferably use the online doc. So if we open this, well, I have it already open. We have the add navigation hub items. This doc covers two things, both adding a new zone, so a new element at the top of the navigation, and also a link within that. So in the first case, we want to add the zone only. If you want to keep it simple, just copy paste it. Doesn't need to be more advanced than that. Yeah, exactly. Okay, give up on the VM. In your case, you don't need to do this because you have Apache running, but so don't use the same URL as I'm using here, of course. So we can see here that we have a My Future tab here. That was it. There's also existing zones. As you might have noticed, it's on location 1. So what you can expect is that in quite soon, next week, you'll be able to set the order of this, so it will be looking like this. But that's all. Kind of same as a priority on any kind of tagged service in Symfony. If you want to have a look at the pull request, it's online on Hybrid UI platform. There's a link for that in the steps branch on this repository, where you can also see If you get stuck, you can all see each and every step and check it out if you want to reset your checkout. So did everyone get through this step? Yeah? The content should be installed already. Could you check, Andrew? Oh, yeah, okay, I'm on the demo installation. So what, do you all have a plain?
I guess for us it's clean one.
It's a clean one, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's normal. You have a slightly different content than what I'm having here.
Increased some font size on PHP song and so on. To recording.
Do you remember where it is?
There should be some Rømcke, I think, something like last. If not, go to the settings of PHP song, but double shift and type increase font size or something like this should be enough.
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe in editor. Something like here. Yeah, another. Yeah. That should be enough.
Yeah. And this one is okay, or? Yeah. Okay. So everyone got the tab, right? Good. That was simple. Maybe too simple. Let's take another one. It's also equally quite simple. In this case, as the text in line says, we'll create a subtree link, but we'll link it to a user, and we'll put it in the admin section, just like in Platform UI. It's currently missing in Hybrid UI, so you're actually adding a feature here. So in this case, it's if it's location ID 5 as written internally here to the admin zone instead of content, so it should be admin. And name users. So as you see, what you're actually doing here in both cases, there's a predefined class that you can just use. What this implies is that both on the zone, the first step we did, and on the link, there's interfaces and classes involved. So if you want to add more complex logic for the zones or the links, you can do that. You can implement your own implementation. But for these simple things like adding a zone or a link, there's already something for you. So just do it like this. Again, let's see if it actually works. So here we have users, which shows users. So it's using the same view as used on content and media. The reason why it's not exposed yet is because it will be enriched with additional tabs and so on, like you're used to from Legacy and also Platform UI. What else to say about this? No, I think it's quite self-explanatory. Everyone got through this? Okay, let's go a bit more advanced. Tiny bit. So step 3, we'll add a route. So instead of pointing to content, we'll point it to a Symfony route. And in this case, it's same thing. It's quite straightforward. It takes a router as an argument, the same thing, but it also takes optionally set route prefix in cases where we have routes that has a given prefix, and you want this menu item to be selected no matter which view or which action within that route you are on. So if you have several subsections there and want the same menu item to be selected, this is where you would do that. But for us, we don't need that yet. So we can remove the set route. And instead of adding it to admin, we can add it to my features. And in this case, we're adding a hello world, so maybe call it hello. And we need a route. So we need to go out of services.yaml and into routing like you're used to. We need to create a route. In this case, we need to set the controller because we're not reusing our route file from a different bundle. We need a controller here. And I actually need to cheat a bit. So what you actually use as path here is completely up to you. What's important is that we need to tell it as always. We need to tell it a controller that exists. So we need to create that as well, and we need to use a unique route name. So we also need a controller here. So one of the tricky things to maybe be aware of when it comes to the controller is that in this case, we want to extend something called the platform UI base controller. So let's start by creating the controller. And there's a couple of things we will need to include. Cheating, sorry. So we're in the namespace of app bundle controller. We need to import the base controller, and we need also to type int against the request from Symfony. So minimum example of getting something to say hello is we could probably do a request here, no response directly with hello world. But in this case, let's use a template so we can take advantage of that later. and checking the service, SAP bundle controller, form controller. So it's the same. Then we need the form HTML twig. Which goes into app resources. And given it's called, it's defined here with an admin, we need a directory. But you're free to do whatever you want. So given we extend the platform UI controller here, we can also extend the platform UI template, which then will take care of several things for us for this view. For those of you that attend this edit talk, this basically takes care about a lot of those things, how it deals with layout within platform or hybrid UI and so on. So it kind of makes that transparent. And that's the following line. Let's give that on a big screen. So there's several blocks here we can set. The main thing we need, first and foremost, I don't know if we can actually get it to work with just that, but the block content. So here we have the hello world. And we'll see if that works. Nope. Ah. Andrew, in this case, you added it in the app bundle itself. Is that better? Yeah, so you can of course place it in different places, but in this case what we ended up with was is the form.html twig within the resource folder of the bundle. Yeah. So what we have here is the block for the breadcrumbs. Currently it seems to steal some stuff from another template. But you can customize this however you want. So in this case, we don't need the admin dashboard necessarily, but because we're not inside admin. But if this was within the admin section, that would make sense. yeah, so now we have where we are. And then the second is the header for the title layer. So that's this section. That's the header, and then that's the content. And title, I think, is currently missing. So basically, that's the bug in the hybrid UI. This should go into the title of the page itself. Any questions so far on this part?
Switch back to the template again.
To the code?
Yeah. This trans default domain. What is this tag? The block trans default domain.
Yeah, this is also this should be more unique. This is because the template was a copy paste from section. But this is, have you used this before, the translation system in there? Because this just specifies that for this template, this is the translation domain, so you don't have to specify it in the trans calls within your template. Now, let's see if we can change the controller to use a Symfony form that takes an int as an input. For those that are not used to Symfony forms, I'll give you the things you need on screen. Otherwise, feel free to get started. So there's a couple of things we want to do here. We want to do a lookup of the location ID, and we also want to do a lookup to show the name instead of that location. So we would need the location service injected into the controller now, and we would also need to change the whole controller to, instead of just doing hello world, we will need to use Symfony forms. So looking at that, as I mentioned, we need, instead of this, we need to specify that we need the location service. So that's a normal argument, and we don't need this anymore. Additionally, we need to extend the controller we have. We need a constructor. And we need to type in location service. Preferably the interface. We need to keep this as usual. And for the form action, we need to do some more stuff also. So maybe you can explain a bit what you did here, actually. Andrew?
So here we have our controller. I called it my form. I'm looking at different things. So what I have here, this class called app_bundle form my form. It's just, if you are familiar with Symfony forms, you usually create some sort of entity to store your data to represent your form. What I did there as an extra thing, I used our own API value object, which is just a data structure we use all over the application, but it's not really needed if you don't want it. What's important, it has a location, for our case, it has a location ID, which you can refer when you access this when you process the request. Your location ID given from the form lands in this property. So this is some sort of abstraction for the data of the form, basically.
Okay, and for the controller, anything to add there, or?
We'll have to look at the code, maybe. Yes, so basically what we have here for our form action is we instantiate our data class, the entity class for form, my form, and we use it creating the Symfony way using form builder, adding fields. So location ID, notice it has to be the same as property name. So in camel case, in this case, type and a submit button. So this is if you look at Symfony tutorial on forms, you'll see something similar but with a task. And this also works in our UI pretty well right now. So we are handling request. The rest of this controller, it looks pretty weird. I just decided to simplify things, and I'm displaying. If you submitted some location, I'm displaying under the form the data for it, not to create too many views, but probably maybe it should be separate view.
Yeah, so then the template is maybe worth mentioning. So
yes.
what you talked about is that if there is a so for this simple exercise, if there is a location in the template, it will be displayed. If not, not.
It was pretty nice. You have form start, form widget, and form end, and it just works.
No, we'll get back to, in step 8, we'll go into content types, or field types. So this is not content at all, this is your custom forms. This is just to show usage, which hopefully should pop up here now.
Yeah, so basically what you know from Symfony, you can incorporate using our PHP API, and you'll get some nice result like this. It's just a submit, so it performs a post, I think, in this case. Yes, it performs a post. So no really some background stuff like PJAX.
Yes, this is where hybrid UI steps in. So that's what it does is enriching a form to make sure it stays within the section and just refreshes that section. So that's one of the more advanced stuff it's currently doing. The idea behind that, and we'll see where we take it, but the idea is that we only refresh what needs to be refreshed. So that's one of the things that makes it faster also, that it doesn't try to redraw the whole page. And also feel free to challenge us if you think this is too complex, but the assumption was that editors sitting there, they are starting to get used to things like Google user interfaces and so on, and they don't expect to wait for the whole page to reload in a classic way. So that's one of the things that is hybrid about this UI. It kind of tries to behave a bit like a modern UI. And you can opt out of this if you want. So this is, I wonder if it's this one. Yeah, so the UI is enhancing links and forms to make sure it stays within the section that you want to update. But you can also opt out of this if you want to have a full page refresh. So we won't necessarily go into that as an exercise right now, but you can see you can just add a class, either on a div or on the form itself, and then the JavaScript will stay away from your code. And same with the standard navigation currently. Any further questions surrounding that? So for those of you that were in Eddie's talk, you could clearly see this when he was debugging, that there was AJAX requests going on when you click around. So basically, the whole application loads with everything on the first load, and after that, there's not much JavaScript, but a little bit to enhance links and forms, so that just that section that you want to update gets updated when you move further.
Give you ability to most likely do every custom CRUD operations that you want on, for example, custom doctrine entity. If you're familiar with Symfony 2 application development, that is how it goes. It's quite natural to integrate full CMS and your custom entities and so on. So that was the point of example, I think.
Yeah. So for the next step, just to verify this thing, we had some problems with the VM earlier. Could I see you click on the browse in the admin menu? The browse thing here. Yeah, so should we try the universal discovery example? We have 15 minutes until the break. I think 15 minutes is too little for the content editing, so I think we leave that for after the break. So the reason why we showed you the form here with location ID and all that is because the next step now is to enhance it, to use the universal discovery, to show you how you can use that. And there's also a document on that. And let's see if we manage to get that to work. So, so in this case, we need to enhance the generated HTML. I don't know if you maybe should have you looked into this part? No? Hmm? Okay. But in the meantime, I'll go through this. So instead of having the input where we had the int, we want a button which will just trigger JavaScript to trigger universal discovery. So the user can either browse or search for content and click on it, select it, put it back into the form, and the form itself behaving exactly the same. So we need to enrich the information given to Symfony forms here. We need to customize the output because we need just the button and not the input. And we need JS class or CSS class on it to hint to the system that this is universal discovery. And we can also configure different things using data attributes on the HTML. We can set different title on the button. We can have saying we allow multiple elements. We can also specify a starting point. So for those of you that have been with Easy Publish for a long time, you maybe start to recognize this. These are the needs for the relation data types, both singular and plural, because universal discovery is used all through the systems, both in version 1 and in version 2. So unlike in legacy, where you had different concepts for browsing, depending on where you were, if you were in an online editor, or if you were on relation, or if you were somewhere else, this takes care of all of them. And for relations, we need the starting point, because we want to make sure the user doesn't have to browse through that starting point. We also need to say if it can be multiple or not, and so on. Pushed, yeah. So here you also see a further example on this. So I don't know if anyone has started on this, enriching the form. No Symfony form expert here. I'm not, so I'm cheating. Yep.
Right.
Did you push to step 3 based?
Okay.
No, quite independent. Yeah, that's fine. What we like to do. So basically, UI guidelines and documentation in hybrid UI give us so few examples how to, or some code snippets that could give us up and running example of markup and so on, or which classes and attributes you need to add to standard HTML attributes. So we use it to this one. And also to override the template of the field in this particular example of field template of location ID field. We use the standard Symfony forms way to do it, basically defining a block which starts with the field ID prefix, which is automatically generated by Symfony forms. The easiest way to know how prefix we must use.
What do you want me to show?
Currently, we should look on the view form html.twig.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that block form location location ID widget, which is the correct name of the block that Symfony, that generally form component use it to render field with some specific field. To be able to do this, we also need to change the form theme to that same view as we defining our blocks for the field. And as you see in that block, I've just copy and paste the snippet from documentation about up and running universal discovery and pass to the attributes some things like correct, also auto-generated by form component ID and correct name, just as in the standard Symfony 2 way. I think if you are familiar with it, so you are in home, I think. And as you see, the rest of the rendering form is just same as it was before. We don't need to change anything there. So this also could give us ability to create our own field types of forms components that we could reuse in other ways. So it should work if it just...
Yeah, okay. So now, yeah, I was on the wrong here. But
yeah,
so the main thing is location ID widget here, where you overrided
yes.
how it's displayed.
If you could render the page, we could go into the profiler and could able to show you where you can find the proper prefix for the field. But yeah, basically in profiler we've got forms tab. Yeah, which lists out the rendered actually forms that are in. If we click on the location ID, you've got on the bottom passed and resolved options, view variables, and so on. I think in view variables, yes, will be something like block prefix. Not in this section, but the next one. Yeah, view variables. And yeah, block prefixes. And we expand this. We got every block prefix that we could use to overwrite the template for that particular field. Basically, it starts from the most generic, like form, to integer, that is quite of type, to that unique field address in our example. Well, basically, we need only to overwrite the template for this one form, but if we enter just some kind of field type, we could create the template for it to be reusable, I think. And that's it. It should work.
So in this case, we get a universal discovery. What we want to select here can be anything, but we have an image.
Yeah.
And we have an error.
Just submit it again, so we should be able to see what's happened. Yeah, probably something is not binding correctly. But in general, the thing is to bind just the value to the correct attribute, I think. I think the error will be in the template somehow, so we just need to try out what's going on there. Could you check that if we select the item in the universal discovery widget, we update the value attribute in the Chrome web development tools? It should be, because I think this is why we got new identifier.
So inspect.
Yeah, and if we select the item,
It's there.
it's there, so it should work, I think. Or yeah, I think yeah.
Yeah, it's complaining about location when it's expecting location ID.
The name you have here should be form.
Yeah.
you show tweet template? Form, yes. Yeah, something is missing here. Let's try to work around by adding form and bracket around this.
Well, there's one mistake here. It uses content ID, but it's null, so that's not only one. But
Higher. The input name attribute.
Yeah.
The last one. Here, surround this with form. I'm not sure how we should do this properly right now, but it has to have a maybe.
Brackets. You want normal brackets, like a square?
But also, while we're at it, we need a location ID, not a content ID. Yeah. So now
we need to figure out how to get this name of the form, because it's some hard coding just to show you it's working. The reason for that is that I'm usually working with kernel, not forms, but I was able to get some result just using Symfony documentation. So this is a benefit, and of course it needs some improvements. Yeah, so we should probably think how to fix this template, but for now it should be okay.
Okay, we have 15 minutes left. It's okay if we do another step before a break, right? So hopefully the other steps won't be that troublesome. As defined in the services.yaml, what we want to use now is also the adding a confirmation action to the involved location. So that's one thing. That was one of the documentation in Hybrid UI. So this is more maybe not something you often use, but it's typically for use in the UI when you suddenly want to trash the whole subtree or something, or you want to do something which might do a lot of changes to your database. So you need to make sure, okay, are you sure you want to do this? And this is where this dialog comes up. So you can use this. This is a reusable component. So a standard form with a standard button, in this case. I guess the thing to note for us is that the example should also be for Symfony Forms code, but it's okay. As you'll see, it's again we will enrich the submit button with our own custom HTML to achieve this. So in this case, there is a dialog we need, and we also need to enrich the button with class and also value here. And there's also example of twig usage of Symfony Forms. So that you can see also how you can do that and reuse the template for that. So there's a reusable dialog template that you can use in this case to just generate the HTML for you with a couple of variables. So let's check that out. So as you can see, what's been added here is just like in the documentation, added the button, customizing the whole button with the button and also the inline dialog, which will be shown on click. Yeah, I won't patch the location lookup right now, but we can do that for the last step, for the whole thing. So in this case, still the same. This part will not give the right ID, but just to give the ID here, it's this button, the submit button, and you get the dialog. So one of the, maybe I should talk a bit around this, one of the concepts in hybrid UI is that there's a lot of reusable components. Actually currently Polymer 2 web components that you can use. And it allows you to have these kind of components that you can reuse. And there's basically an API kind of that you provide values in the data attributes to them, and they give you a behavior back. So it's kind of a neat trick to kind of have reusable components on the HTML level. And wow, we're playing around with it, and hope you guys get to try it as well a bit and give us feedback on what you think. So in this case, I'll cancel because we know it will fail. Also, before we go to break, let's look at the last thing which is documented in the hybrid UI currently, and that is the tabs. So as you saw in the content view, let's go to content view. There is a tab structure here. And in your cases, you might need to use this as well. So we made this also a reusable component. What you might have noticed also is that there's some async things going on here that could need some more tuning, but the point is when you go to view, only the view is loaded, everything else is async. So there is nothing loaded on the first view here for details, versions, location, related content, and so on. This is done on click. So this refreshes this part of the screen. And you have the different tabs in there here. And this is something you can reuse. So again, there's some classes you can use there to model your HTML so that the JavaScript involved and the styling involved is taken into account. But it's more than that. There's also the JavaScript part of it. So there's an API for dealing with that if you need to. Given this is a component, you can hook into the whole process going on there and customize it. And then, as I mentioned, there's an asynchronous part. You can also control this. So if you want a certain tab to not work asynchronously, but actually be synchron, you can also deal with that. So you can turn it off quite easily. Well, actually, the logic is opposite here, as you might have seen. It's you define which one is async. So it's a custom HTML element here, custom tag or web component. That's for the asynchronous block. But let's see what we have here. Did you also add for async, or is it? Yeah, okay. No. So in this case, we will show a couple of tabs synchronous, nothing fancy here. So if you go to the code for the template, we now have additional code for tabs where the form will be part of, given the form is within the first tab. And let's see if it works. Yeah. Use the microphone.
Basically, only thing that you need to do to use tabs in your custom features is just markup. It's quite benefit, I think, in compared to the platform UI 1.0. Yeah, so that's it, I think.
Any questions around this? Then let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about content editing and how you migrate a field type from platform version 1 to version 2 to get it to work with content editing. Before we start on content editing, one good thing to maybe cover now is actually the UI guidelines, because as you see on the screen, it's not exactly styled what we have here. It's plain buttons and whatnot, and we haven't really used what's in the UI guidelines. So I don't know if you've seen this going around in the backend, but there are quite some things that are, like here, styled, that has some predefined buttons, and this comes from the UI guidelines. So if I find the right place, there's its own repository on GitHub. It's easysystems.github.io.ui guidelines for the static page version of it, or just easysystems/UI guidelines on github.com if you want to go directly to the repository. So this is, as the text there says, this is a resource for designers, product managers, developers, and everyone alike to have a unified language of how you deal with build and customize Easy Platform admin user interface. There's a lot of reading here on what it's, the framework of what it tries to be, but to jump straight into it, it has, as mentioned earlier, a lot of components. So it has basic buttons, like you would be used to, from, for instance, Bootstrap or whatever. And it has all the different flavors of that. It also have a way to let you add icons to those buttons. There's a whole range of different icons to use. As you see a couple of examples of here. There's also action buttons. and typically which will show up on the right side most likely on the user interface. And so on and so forth. And also forms itself, the different input forms. You can set to see how the styling should be on our messages and so on. So take a look at this if you're interested in this. There's a lot of different things here, both in terms of typography and also on the different colors used for the interface. Going back here, if we want to apply this to this form, we need to go to the buttons section. And while the icons are not implemented yet, the colors are. So let's pick some styling. First, for the location ID widget, we have one button. So it's the button to open the universal discovery. In the guidelines, maybe this would be the most appropriate button, but we don't have the icon, so we can just use a generic one. So that is plainly easy button. And if we go here, that should then change style. For the one below, let's assume that's the primary action. So that's the submit button here. Again, it should, no, that's not right. Yeah, I also need the easy button. And let's cheat a bit, add some spacing. So now we have a little bit of styling on that, but there's also this dialog that we most likely want to also style. In this case, cancel being a standard operation, just using the cancel on the easy button. For the confirmation one, it's typically used for something, as I mentioned before, something that is damaging to the repository or might be not necessarily damaging, but affecting a lot of content. So in this case, we can use the negative button to give it the clear styling. Not to be negative, but now we have styling. Like that. So we hope this can be useful in your day-to-day use, extending the UI. We might also try to align a bit more with UI frameworks going forward. Now Bootstrap 4 is out. We are currently evaluating that, if there's something we want to use more actively also for backend. For frontend, we already use Bootstrap, and we're probably going to stay with that, even though Foundation is also quite cool. But with Bootstrap 4 out, with Flex and everything, it's quite good. Then let's have a look at content editing. As you might have noticed, browsing around there's no content editing shown whatsoever yet. Content editing is highly in a work in progress right now, so it's not been exposed via any kind of buttons. Maybe except here, actually. Yeah, those are not connected yet. So as shown inline in the services.yaml, you can access it via its route. In this case, some random content Too many slashes. Error. So in this case, yeah. This is, of course, something you want to see in the end. The information, all of this is something you expose via your button, and it's given to the route. But if it's not there, it will ask for it currently. So right now, very few things regarding content editing is merged. It's purely work in progress in pull request. So what you're seeing here now is the UGC part of it. Only the couple of field types implemented, the title or easy string, and also the easy text should be implemented, and the very plain ones. Also, user should be partly implemented because it was used for user registration before. So let's add some more stuff to this. Currently, not really documented, but one good place to look is the current work in progress on easy systems repository forms. So to pick a simple example here, we take ESPN. Not maybe something all of you use normally in Easy Platform today because of shop thing, but or not dealing with books all the time. But it's quite simple. So in this case, what we have here is, I talked earlier about field value mappers, or its full name, field value form mapper interface. What this adds, it's a method to map the value that you have in the form to the value we have in the repository. The same exists from before for the field definition. So this is why the class is here from before, because for content type editing, this needs to be here. So what we are looking now to add is this specifically. We can either extend the existing class, or we can override it completely. And we need to register it as a tag, or using the tags. In this case, we went with the full type here. So what you saw earlier, we have the map field definition, and we have the map field value form. I don't know if you want to add some comments about this, Adam? If so, using the... Okay.
Map the is required from the field definition itself. Also, you generating the label and so on and so on. So basically, the target of this method is to map the field definition from easy systems from repository into the Symfony forms. So I think it's quite self-explanatory. We're also adding here some additional pattern attribute to ESBN, validating on the front end, and so on. That's what is worth to mention it, that are validation errors, for example, from the field definition are mapped automatically to the some labels in the Symfony forms and so on. So I think that's it. If you would like to talk about mapping the field value. If you are familiar with dealing with forms in Symfony, it's no any rocket science there. We just need to get the use builder as which is that same class as we use in the controller, for example, to build our example form, just creating the fields. We also applying some model transformer, which is also something that you probably are familiar with if you are the Symfony developer. If not, basically the role of this transformer is to map values from request into the normalized way, and then from normalized value into the model value, and so on in other way.
But maybe, is there someone here that is not familiar with Symfony forms much at all? Everyone's used it already quite a lot. So then, yeah, it's quite standard Symfony form here. You get this passed in from the repository form system. What's maybe more unique is the field data, which contains what you need in here for the field definition. So you can from the content type model, you can tell the form how to behave here. So this can be quite a bit more advanced in other cases. If we look to the pull request currently going on, I don't know if keyword is probably not that much more advanced, but sorry, that's a mix of different things. But let's see on the keyword. In this case, yeah, pretty straightforward. The same thing here. Guess maybe author or relation would be a better example. So in this case, given an author can be several. It's a list of items. You get a bit more to deal with. But again, it's pretty standard Symfony form things. Again, what's on the validation, you pick it from the field definition and inject it into Symfony. So let's see about the code, how it works. Let's go to the admin panel. Let's go to content types and see if there are some of them we can add ESPN to. So not much styling here at the moment. No, maybe not the best candidate. So creating a new one here, just title and ESPN. So in this case, we don't really have a content yet. So we need to create a new one. So there's actually another route we will use. That's one you might have used before if you used the UGC stuff. And I need to double check what that is. So there's a couple of routes exposed by repository forms, and that is both create content and also edit content. So we want to do the create. So in this case, it's the following. So I called it test, and we want to use language English here, and we can put it under well, this one, or home. Normal 2. So this is the extremely well-styled display of this content. You've never seen anything as beautiful as this. The name, well, let's stay with test. Content. ESPN, so in this case, it wasn't set up to be required. So I was able to publish this without. Now we need the other route, because now we need to edit it. Again, from repository forms, currently this is only in master, so for version 2. We'll most likely actually change this route, because for those of you who use legacy, you might notice it's the exact same thing. So to be able to use legacy and hybrid UI at the same time, we probably will adapt this a bit. But for now, it's this. Oh, yeah, I used the wrong route. I need to create a draft. That's the difference between these two. So it's actually quite similar to legacy in that term. You have the first redirect going to create the draft for you, and then redirecting to the edit view, which allows you to edit the draft. So that's what it was complaining about. I was trying to edit something that was not a draft. Yeah, so in this case, I shouldn't have needed to see this, but that's something we'll tune. So again, maybe finding an example of ESPN. Just for fun, pick ESPN 10, because that should now not be validated. We'll see if it works, but if you go back to the type here, there's actually... It's not necessarily something you must do, because there will always be validation against the field type. But in this case, we added additional validation to Symfony. So what's being used here is actually the format of ESPN 13, the current one, and there was an older version of this called ESPN 10 before. Let's see if there's an example here. This is the Norwegian site. Do anyone remember exactly what's the difference? There doesn't seem to be an example. But okay, I can just copy-paste a 13 string and make it wrong. It's the same outcome. Should be. Yeah, so in this case, it gives us inline error on this. Again, the styling here is amazing. We'll just leave it as this. Editors will be, they will like the simplicity. It's back to the roots. And now it was stored, and we have the ESPN. So this was transferred into the field value of the API and stored in a repository. So that's it on the ESPN thing. I don't know if you have any questions so far on this. Is there other things you want us to cover now? Because otherwise we will start to talk about external storage, and we start to then go into a bit more kernel topic, and not so much hybrid UI topic. Let me rephrase that. Other questions in general you have about hybrid UI? On how to deal with it? That's a bit hard to tell, but roughly Q4. So, no, more towards the end. Yeah, I think November, December for stable, roughly. I can't promise it, but at least that's what we aim for. And while it's not really been 100% decided yet, what we probably will aim for is do the last version 1x in parallel to version 2, similar way as Symfony. So basically do a dual launch with the first fast track release of version 2, and also then LTS of version 1. Again, what else? Well, we might manage to also add support for Symfony 4. We'll see, but that comes out in November, so depends on timing. Other questions? What I can maybe also point you to is so if you're looking to test this during the fall, you can use good old Composer. It's not that old, but you can of course ask for the alpha builds, but we haven't really done that so frequently. The last one I think is from June. We'll probably do a new alpha release in September and blog about it. But first we need to get the content type editing in place, everything we have currently in progress. And we might add some styling before the alpha. We'll see. Also, if you want to look to if you have a current platform bundle, or easy publish for 5 bundles for that sake, there's a couple of proof of concept pull requests that you can look at. Both tags bundle have a pull request for adding hybrid UI support, and also Smile's ECUI cron bundle has a pull request that shows, in this case, very simple change for changing it to. support hybrid UI. So there's yeah, it's changed for Symfony 3, so it's not really relevant to hybrid UI itself. It's in this case adding Pjax as a prefix on the path. I'm not that involved, so I don't know if that's a must, but it makes the system automatically deal with some of the stuff for you if you do that. And it's a good convention if the route is not supposed to be exposed in another way. So if it's only supposed to be handled from within the UI, this is kind of a convention for that. And then, well, what we started with here, adding the link to this route within Platform UI. So that's basically it in this bundle. So it can be very simple depending on the bundle. If we look to tags, I think it's a bit more complex, but not necessarily that much. It's because tags does a bit more, let's say, craft underneath. It needs to be more aware of what Pjax request in the hybrid UI is. So if it's going to end up being exactly like this, or if it's going to be worked a bit more on, we'll see. But again, yeah, as Damien mentioned here, and for those that joined for the conference in London, we might improve this and not make it necessary. And okay, here there's some tunings to the JavaScript and also the requirements here to make it enable version 2. But again, you see that it's mainly about adding the zone links here because it's already exposed as a route in Symfony. So any bundle you have which is purely written completely over to Symfony and doesn't use legacy anymore, it's quite simple to do this with. Currently it's auto-generated. So basically you have your site or site access in the front end and it's connected to a site group. And as far as I know, the logic right now is that it generates automatically a /admin for that site group. So it uses the same config, the same database from the same site group. So you can define an admin within that config, and you can start to add your own content view overrides and so on to enhance the backend UI, but you don't have to. So that's how it currently works. But if you have further questions, ping, for instance, Batra when he's back next week on Twitter or on something, on Slack. And we'll definitely document this more in the next month. Okay, will you use your own computer or for the external storage? From GitHub or from PHP Storm?
From PHP Storm.
So everyone here aware of what the external storage is in Easy Platform? Yeah?
We use them. This is not really a topic of hybrid UI, but since we have some time.
And since we covered field types, it's
Yes.
it's when you have an external table that needs to have external data connected to the field type. So example being ECURL, author, keyword tags should have it.
Rich text.
Rich text?
It has some
Yeah, for the
storage
URL.
For URL.
Yeah.
Basically. And of course, with what we've shown you, you can use data created by your form, which we've shown you to store something into external storage. But this is how far it goes in relation to UI.
But which one should we show?
URL.
URL?
So URL storage, maybe find the, yes. Yeah, let's show doctrine storage.
But maybe first, let me give some context there. What we are about to show is actually something that was introduced now in 1.11 by Andrew. Before, until now, you needed to use, for historical reasons, you needed to use the EC SETA components database interface to deal with the database. So the change here is that we're moving towards exposing Doctrine directly, and we're slowly moving also the internal, our own code to use Doctrine debol directly. The difference is that it's a much newer interface. It's easier to work with, and you end up with typically less code when you deal with the database. So it's kind of, and also much better documented. It's maintained, and so on. So that's the context. Should we start with Doctrine or Legacy, or?
I think we can show Doctrine, because this is more into the direction we're heading. So this is one thing. But maybe let's actually start with YAML configuration. There are two files for this. Of course, you define this in your bundle in one place. It could be. Unfortunately, we don't have some nice workshop example. But yeah, external storage gateways, and there is another one which is called field type external storages. It's probably somewhere else. Oh yes, here. So let's start with this one.
External storage?
Yes. At the end we have easy URL. Oh yes, so this is the one. So basically this is kernel code, but you'll do this in a similar way in any bundle. If your field type has some external data, you can define such a service using your own class. And which uses arbitrary arguments depending on your needs. Here we have storage gateway, which is the last layer before accessing any storage like database. Most likely.
It's basically a term used internally in legacy storage engine, where you have, there's within it's a couple of extra layers, and the last one before you enter the database is gateway. That's the one handling that. So in this case, it's the same. You have the external storage, which thanks to this line, will be given to the repository, which knows it's an external storage and uses the interface defined as an external storage. It also knows by this tag that it's easy URL, that is the on the end there, the alias. So it knows when there's a field type with alias called easy URL, and it knows it has the external storage, it will emit it. So it will give calls to this storage during the store and retrieval process, actually, for content.
Exactly. So this alias could be your field type, your identifier for your field type. And this is all we need for storage. And now for the gateway level, maybe we should also see YAML for this. Yes, this is. I think it's still it actually uses Doctrine right now. So this other service that we've seen on a previous file, this is the one. So basically, what changed here is that we are fully using dependency injection. So there's no magic. you can accept the tag that Andre highlighted for you. There's nothing special about this. So basically, we have these two definitions that you can put in your services YAML in your bundle. And let's see class for URL storage. Maybe the other one.
External storage first.
Yes. Oh, yes, this one.
So when the repository deals with this is what it will call. So you have well, maybe jump to the interface.
Let's expand use. Oh, maybe. Oh, yeah.
This one, right?
Yes, this is the one. So basically, your storage class has to define field storage interface. Don't worry, this is documented on our new docs site. So everything, every step, you don't need to remember it at once. So basically, you have class that has this contract that has to define, implement this interface and define those methods. The last one is for indexing, so for search engine.
But this one is deprecated.
Yes, maybe. Oh yes, of course.
Because we
had the indexable. Yeah, that was one of the changes. So yeah, maybe let's not go into indexable because.
But we can look at URL storage, I think.
Yeah. So basically, what you have here, this class, our class accepted gateway because we use database. If you wish to use something else, it could be whatever you decide. But basically, this code is just a very specific way to insert data into the storage. As I said, it could be anything. It could be a NoSQL database. It could be some other thing. As long as you have a gateway for it or some other service available and injectable in YAML.
So maybe also worth noting here is most people here were attending Eddie's talk. So this URL is the exact same data he was manipulating and showing. So he was showing it from the editorial side where you have the list of URLs and you can go in and edit them. And typically in Legacy you also have the script that goes over them and check if they're still alive and marks them as alive or not. And this is the view from the field type. So this is what's going on in ECURL field type, in rich text field type. Anyone else? No, it's those two.
Map location also
for URL.
Something.
Yeah, maybe. And essentially, it needs to translate URL from the user to URL ID. Because in the field, we only store the ID, because as you saw in Eddie's presentation, the URL itself is stored in a separate table.
Yeah, also binary files and media have its external storage, but it's file system. So it's another example of different usage than just a database.
Yeah.
So if you want to save some file on a disk, this is as well used. So as you can see, we here implement all the methods, and there are basically if you've stored something, you should make sure to return proper value, like true here, or false if in this case we don't store empty URLs, so we return false.
So I guess we can maybe have a look at the insert URL. Or
yes.
So if we then go to the doctrine storage here.
So this is the service that I showed you on this second YAML. It basically also got injected directly with doctrine connection, doctrine/dbal/connection. Once again, it could be anything you wish. If you have maybe connection to some other storage, this is fine. What's good about this and follows the spirit of version 2 is that we are actually going back to using Symfony and Doctrine in a pure way. So what you see here is what any Doctrine and Symfony developer would do. So
Yeah, if they use debal.
Yes, if they use debal, they would create query builder. Actually, for ORM, it's similar. And if you have some external system which uses ORM, you can of course inject entity manager and for sure use it as well instead of debal queries. But what you see here is Doctrine DBIL, no legacy Zeta components here. So this is a very simple way to store data somewhere else if content object model is not enough for you.
Maybe just for reference here to show the difference.
Yeah, this is
Maybe it's not the best example, but
more or less Zeta components, right?
yeah. So the difference here is you have it's more verbose, so to say. Doctrine does more for you. So here, typically with Zeta components, you would have to quote tables, so you would have to quote everything, and you would inline bind them. This is maybe not the most best example, but in more complex queries, the difference is very obvious. That the code, you get less code out of it, and it's more easier to read. Also, I don't know if you see that, but it's definitely easier to read. And also on well, a bit advanced maybe, but on the debal, you can also specify an array and bind that. That's quite advanced. That's something Zeta did not. And it will then do a lot of automatic stuff underneath for you and bind basically the whole string. But it's quite cool. To show an example of that, I think I might have that here.
Keywords, was it? Or
oh, you use it there in keywords?
I think I use it somewhere for sure in this namespace.
Yes.
Yes, here. So basically, what this will create, if you are familiar with SQL, this will just create you for, in this case, this will create an in expression, which will generate this keyword list without any extra loops or some other unwanted stuff. So this is basically pure Doctrine debal. Also, there's some more validation possible. The other option for parameter is param int or integer, was it, array, if you have numbers, so you can make sure that they get validated properly.
Yeah, it can take an array of ints and an array of strings.
Basically, what we're trying to say is Doctrine DBL is richer, and it's in the long run we expect it to be better. And also, we can maybe already tell this that we aim to support more databases, which is very sort of uniform way to use Doctrine debal for this.
Yeah.
also.
Any questions regarding this whole thing? Regarding external storage, how you use it with your field types?
Isn't the recommended way to have a customized field type now, right?
If you have a external table for some data that needs to be connected with the field type, this is the recommended way now, yes. There are things you can maybe simplify here, like it's all purely, as you mentioned, purely dependency injection here now. So you can implement this external storage thing, and you can technically use directly the connection there, I think.
Yes.
You don't necessarily need to have this duality of gateway and external storage. That's more for us, because we try to gradually migrate from one database to another and then be able to switch.
Yes, we have documented this.
Is it PR or merged?
Merge and on red heads docs. How was it?
So I don't know if you've
Yeah.
seen this, but we have a new documentation as of 1.5 weeks ago. It's on GitHub, and it's using read the docs. So this is the new place for documentation. It has somewhat better search. Maybe
External storage should be fine. Hopefully. Storing, yes, it looks like the one. So this is what we've said at the beginning.
Yeah, so this is explaining the interface and the different methods you need to implement. The has field data, store field data, get field data. And then I guess it also goes into the... Well, basically this page covers everything around the fields by now, or tries at least.
Yes.
So you have the search field, which is dealing with the indexing, is explained here. You have the values, it's explained there.
Storage class should be also somewhere here.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a gateway-based storage at the bottom, yes. So this is the old one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they.
Yeah, this is not updated.
Maybe,
Or-
but it was on the old docs, so
Yeah.
we
But
need to check this.
In summary, we try to cover everything around this in the doc. And if you see anything missing, don't hesitate to reach out either on issue or pull request on the repository. Now that it's available for everyone to give comments and fixes. We actually, after just over 2 weeks, we had like 20 pull requests from community, so it's the right move to move this to GitHub. Any other questions? Because actually, well, we had some problems catching up on this topic and explaining it to you now in a smooth way. I hope we managed to show that, given we presented this in way less time than what was set up, it's not that difficult. It's all most of it is all Symfony in hybrid UI. It's much closer to what most of us here are used to. So we really hope this it's much simpler for everyone.
Yes, I was able to create this custom form, which we showed you at the beginning at 1 a.m. using Symfony docs. And I usually, this is what I've shown you now is more my field of expertise, databases and stuff. I didn't do much of the forms and managed to do this. So I think it's better than it was, for sure, simpler.
So I guess what you're trying to say that even a database guy can get used to this.
Yeah.
Backend UI I started in 2016. I'm not still finished.
Yeah, I don't think he would. I don't think you would manage that fast in platform
No,
UI.
no way. I don't know UE at all.
No.
I stopped with jQuery, seriously. It's not even a framework.
jQuery is everything you need, right?
Of course.
Okay, so we actually have nothing else. I asked plenty of times for questions, so I guess there is no more unless there is anything else. And I think, yeah.
A quick one, maybe for me at least. So regarding the new implementation of your field types and in expansion to that for your content types, you are now fully exposing the indexation on Solar, but are you planning so to, such as using Doctrine DBL, create the full configuration for other searching engine, such as you started in Rømcke with Elasticsearch?
That's not really connected to Doctrine at all, but we have a kind of experimental part of the kernel for Elastic implementation of a search engine, but it's currently it hasn't been worked on for maybe 3 years, and it's using Elastic 1 or Elasticsearch version 1, which was called back then. There are a couple of persons quite interested in moving this forward, so we try to coordinate that. I know there's people in NetCan that are interested in that. So if you're also interested or others are interested, we're more than happy to coordinate the effort and also help out. But from our side, it's not a priority yet in product management. But in the technical team, we're more than happy to help out on this because we're all kind of keen on getting it to work. We all want to use Elasticsearch as well. And then we all have, we know customers that kind of almost demand Elastic because they've moved to that and they don't want to learn Solar. But eventually we need to get it to boot the search engine. So what you do now for your field types for Solar will also work on Elastic for the most part. The advanced topics like Peter showed yesterday, where you actually extend the Solar bundle, that's specific to Solar, well, at least at the moment. Some of it might be reused between the two, but we'll see. Then, I don't know, I guess some here has read the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so did everyone bring their towel? No? Because as we stopped early, we also have these to use if you want. No, joking. Yeah, we're done, so hope you enjoyed it.